The Human Security Officer, Part 45. They both stood at the edge, peering down into the abyss that stretched before them. The dark chasm loomed ominously, its depths shrouded in shadows that seemed to beckon them closer, whispering promises of adventure mixed with uncertainty. "I can think of two plans that I'm pretty sure you wouldn't mind," Gareth began, breaking the heavy silence between them. Well, I can't exactly complain, given that I'm still alive, but are you really sure about this?" Penn replied, her brow furrowing slightly as she regarded the vast drop. "Look, it's an easy climb down and back up. I know I'd be fine, but if you're not comfortable with it, we can always find another way around," he reassured her, his tone casual yet firm. He instinctively reached up to touch one of the frills on his head, a gesture he always made when deep in thought, revealing his uncertainty. "You're more familiar with these waters, so, if you're confident, then I trust you," she finally said, her voice steady. A hint of a smile tugged at her lips, which she discreetly concealed by turning her head slightly. She looked down into the chasm, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "Let's get to it then," Penn declared, her resolve firming as she prepared to take the leap. Gareth felt a jolt as Penn turned and lowered herself over the edge. In a matter of moments, she was nimbly picking her way from one outcropping to another, discovering a meandering path down to the chasm's floor. Gareth had witnessed countless displays of her strength already, yet he was still taken aback by her incredible agility. It was astonishing to see her manage their combined weight with such ease. At times, it was merely the grip of a single digit that held them from falling into the void below. He could see her muscular form flex as she shifted her hands and feet, seeking secure anchors along their descent. There was a concentrated focus in her demeanor, but she never uttered a single complaint. Eventually, he summoned the courage to speak. "I don't want to distract you, but..." She let out a controlled exhale, glancing back at him. "Please, do. I'd rather engage in conversation than focus solely on this descent. Well, it's just, all this activity, especially the running, it's remarkable. I don't know many species that could match your strength, but I certainly don't know any who could run for hours on end. A jog, to be fair, but I get your point. It's our evolutionary niche, I suppose. Even among Earth's predators, I don't think many can match our endurance," she explained, deftly shifting her weight as she continued to climb down. "Endurance predation," Gareth echoed thoughtfully, as if quoting a book he'd read. "Yeah, that's what it's called. Science or history wasn't really my forte, but apparently, when other predators were dropping down from trees or lying in wait for ambush, humans would just keep walking, and walking, and walking. Eventually, your prey would have to lie down and, That is a bit unsettling, to be honest. I was almost surprised I could keep up with you when we first started moving. I didn't quite understand what Tunny T meant, but I think I'm getting it now. Do keep in mind, and I'm not trying to brag, but I may be a poor example of the whole human race. Most humans aren't going to be matching my stamina. I've trained for years, both in terms of physique and skill set. Your average Joe or Jane, well, I don't want to say they couldn't, but not every human is a guaranteed marathon runner. The potential is there, but there's a significant difference between potential and what is ultimately realized," Gareth acknowledged. "Yeah, though I have to admit I've had an easier time than many. Not all, but many." "How so?" Gareth asked, genuinely curious. "Simple genetics. I'm bigger than most. I put on muscle and maintain it easier than others. I grew up in an environment that stressed fitness. Military training helped too, but it's not like I didn't put in the effort myself." As if to illustrate her point, she extended one hand, effortlessly holding their combined weight for a moment before pulling back in and continuing downward. Gareth scrambled to hold on as tightly as he could, a few startled clicks escaping his mouth. He couldn't help but glance down, and a wave of dizziness washed over him. Impressive, yes, very impressive, but I'd appreciate it if you didn't do that again. I've had my fill of plummeting towards hard, solid surfaces." Penn laughed at his nervousness. I had a drop instructor who would always say that it isn't the fall that kills you, it's just the sudden stop at the end. I'm quite certain I'd perish from fright long before I reached that sudden stop, which would honestly be a mercy, he quipped. With a focused effort, she made a particularly far reach for another handhold, shifting their weight skillfully. You sell yourself short, Gar, you handled the drop well. Better than some cadets I've seen. You needn't flatter me, Pen. I hold no illusions about my abilities. I mean it. I do, she insisted, flashing him a bright smile. As they neared a large jutting ledge just above the chasm's floor, she stepped off onto it, sitting down with her legs dangling over the side. She took a moment to catch her breath before sliding right off the edge and landing gracefully on the chasm's floor. Well, thank you, then, for the vote of confidence. That said, they both gazed up at the imposing climb that awaited them. I think I'll leave the displays of physical prowess to you. Heh, Pen chuckled, her mind drifting to their earlier interactions. What's so funny? Gareth asked, raising an eyebrow. I suppose you could say we've had a rocky relationship, she mused, gesturing around to the rugged terrain and turning to flash a playful smile over her shoulder, her pearly teeth glimmering in the low light. Sensational, Pen. Truly, he replied, rolling his eyes at her pun. Fine, fine. I'd love a distraction. If not puns, then how about you tell me more about your people? I don't know much beyond what you've shared, which is rather limited. I know your home planet has beautiful horizons and that the sun doesn't set. You went to war a long time ago with the Oceans? I think Tunny T mentioned that. As she spoke, she examined the climb, selecting a starting point a couple of lengths to the left of where they had just descended. Gareth grimaced slightly as he watched her spit in her hands, rub them together, and hoist herself up to the first ledge. Yes. The war was quite some time ago, but we teach it in great detail even today so that future generations never repeat the same mistakes, he explained. What about before then? Pen probed. That is the one and only war my people have fought. According to our ancient history, there were trade squabbles at the beginnings of Wayland society, but nothing that could truly be called a war. We learned quickly that we needed to handle our problems like adults, engaging in earnest discussions and compromises rather than throwing tantrums. Is that how you perceive us? As tantruming children? She asked, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. Yes and no. I don't mean to insult, but your people seem to have an unhealthy obsession with violence. The technological advancement necessary for space travel also brings the capability for horrific destruction. The same fusion energy that powers a planet can also raise it. It's expected that most species that reach this level have learned not just to avoid using such technology but to view the very idea of destruction as pathetic. It takes an ignorant mind to suggest violence as a solution. Most of the civilized, most of the rest, I apologize, of the galaxy see violence as something to grow out of. Pen fell silent, allowing him to continue. I mean, look at you. I would have thought that with everything you've been through, you'd have a different perspective. What do you mean by everything I've been through? She asked, her curiosity piqued. I saw you, or rather, you showed me those injuries last night, he said quickly, backtracking. And you've mentioned bits of what happened, not the details, but enough. I would have thought someone like you would have a clear stance on it. It's not that simple. I fought against people who needed to be stopped. They wouldn't have backed down otherwise, she replied, her expression thoughtful. Why? I'd like to continue this conversation, but I'm curious, what happened exactly? He asked. Are you asking for personal details or? She began. Broadly speaking, what was the reason for all of it? Gareth clarified. She hoisted herself up to a secure position and paused for a moment to gather her thoughts. It was a corporate war. Another one. A group that managed mining and other operations in the Calica system believed they should be the ones fully in charge. They overthrew the local governments and took control of any local forces. They thought they had enough political leverage and paramilitary strength to make fighting more trouble than it was worth. But they were mistaken? Gareth inquired, intrigued. Not at first, no. They bogged down any bureaucratic response and made it clear that they would use their private military. They controlled any data flowing in and out of the system. It took about a year before enough clear-cut footage of their crimes leaked out. Eventually, they were declared a rogue entity, and a response was mounted. Crimes, he echoed, an uneasy feeling settling in. Exactly what you think, she said, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. I see, he murmured, his mind racing as he considered the implications. He could envision the sentinels they had encountered. If they were willing to resort to such measures, he didn't need much help imagining the extent of their other transgressions. He felt Pen's slight tremor as she steadied herself. Hold on, though. We were talking about your people. Enough about grim topics, tell me about Walia, he suggested, hoping to steer the conversation back to lighter subjects. All right, what to say about it? What you mentioned before is true. The surface is one vast sea dotted with chains of islands. Most life is aquatic, much like my people, but there are small and vibrant ecosystems within the forests of the larger islands. The plants are unlike anything here, their leaves are enormous and flat, resembling massive blankets, she elaborated. Now that I think about it, your people have been spacefaring for quite some time. Were you born on Walia? He asked, genuinely curious. Yes, actually. Walia is my home planet in both senses of the word. I was born in Oda City to a clutch of 17 brothers and 2 sisters. Whoa, that's a big family, he exclaimed, taken aback. On the contrary, it's considered on the smaller side for the average clutch. 2 daughters in one is a blessing, she replied with a hint of pride. Why is that? Gareth inquired, puzzled. Wylans don't differ from humanity as much as Oshans do. In fact, on a galactic scale, we're quite similar. However, there are some major differences. Population-wise, Wylans sit at about 75% male and 25% female, she explained. Oh. There's also a significant amount of sexual dimorphism. Waylan females stand about twice the size of males and possess more arms, along with an additional pair of ancillary legs. There are also a number of internal differences, but twice your size is almost the average height for humans, he noted, intrigued. I'm a bad example. I'm considered abnormally tall for a Waylan male. That said, the height difference is striking enough that you'll know when you see one. It's funny, the lack of obvious differences among humans led to some amusing blunders during first contact, for both Oshans and Wylans, she chuckled, recalling the tales she'd heard. Gareth laughed too, picturing the initial confusion that must have arisen. He had heard a few stories about the first contact emissaries constantly mixing up their sirs and ma'ams. As far as he knew, they eventually gave up and stopped using the terms altogether. With their conversation flowing, they continued their descent into the chasm, forging a bond strengthened by their shared experiences, and the challenges that lay ahead.